All right, so we've talked a couple of times, we've mentioned it over lunch, food, you know, it's kind of important. If you're going to live in a city, you kind of got to eat, and you want to eat well, and you want to eat affordably. If you go to planetforward.org, you will see a ton of stories that students have done on food. Food waste, food production, healthy food, food deserts, a lot of issues of social justice and equity that come through the table, and health, a lot on health. So here is one story about how we might do things in the city, right, as the cities go vertical. This is a piece from our friends at Purdue University called Verticale, and you'll notice the production technique that's used in this sort of storytelling device. Go ahead.
Hydroponic systems can be built anywhere, outside or even in a building. Imagine if a system like this was built to produce a variety of vegetables and some fruits in food desert communities. This is the idea behind Verticale. Verticale hopes to sell the produce in the same building in which it is grown.
So this whole story is about how to use hydroponics and aquaponics in a vertical structure to make use of a limited space to grow food in an urban environment. One of the reasons we want to talk about food in the context of the city, as Kathleen Merrigan mentioned earlier, is there are so few people who are now with their hands in the soil growing it. I'd like to introduce to you one of the best friends this Planet Forward project has, Chris Policinski. He is CEO of Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes is one of the organizations that's really helped us get to where we are. So Chris, if you're around the corner and around the wall, come on out. How are you, man?
Hi, Frank. Great to see you. Great to see you.
So, Chris, I think a lot of people have heard from the Planet Forward family, have met you and heard you before. But for those who have not, you guys saw the butter on your table, right? Land O'Lakes, you all know Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes is a lot more than butter. Just a quick hit on what your company.
Well, thanks, Frank.
Cooperative.
Everybody thinks of Land O'Lakes as a butter company, and thank you for serving us well in that regard. We are indeed a butter company. We were formed in the 1920s by a bunch of upper Midwest dairy farmers. The basic story, Frank, is every little city in the upper Midwest had a creamery. The local farmers shipped their sweet cream milk to that creamery and produced a high-quality product, butter. Back in the 1920s, though, they didn't have any bargaining power in the channel, so they formed a company called Land O'Lakes to aggregate their supply, gain power in the channel, and get their high-quality product to the population centers here on the East Coast. That led then to farmers saying, boy, you aggregate our supply, well, aggregate our demand. We formed a feed division and a seed division. And if you turn the clock forward nearly 100 years, we're still farmer-owned. We still have those proud dairy products, but we also own Purina Animal Feed. And we're one of the largest precision agriculture consulting companies in the world with Winfield Solutions.
Now, what you should know is a lot of the reason we're here came about because of a conversation Chris and I had on a panel we were on, where we were talking about global health and hunger. And I'm just interested in perhaps you're sharing a little bit about where that conversation came from and why you personally are focused on that.
Yeah, if you step far enough back, we all know the basics. We're going to have to nearly double food production between now and 2050 to serve the soon-to-be 9+ billion people on the planet. That means we're going to have to grow a lot more food in a lot of creative ways, and you saw some of those in your last video. My view, though, is that we have to engage folks in the dialogue of how that needs to be done, because we're going to have to grow that food in an increasingly productive and sustainable way. We don't have a lot of resources, if you think about it, to nearly double food production.
Because you can't double land, you can't double water. You can't.
The facts are there's maybe 12% more arable land on the planet, and only half of that can really be brought into production.
12%?
12%, and only half is really usable, and we already have a water crisis. So our motivation at Land O'Lakes was to enrich the dialogue around how are we going to do this. It can be done. We need lots of creative solutions. And we need to be more inclusive in our discussion of what it means to produce food. There really is just different food production techniques, some small, some large, some low-tech, some high-tech. We need all of that.
And what do you see as the challenge when we talk about urbanizing and we talk about 2/3 of the planet's population living in cities? Yeah. And when we talk, as Kathleen Merrigan was talking about earlier, we have 1%-ish of the population actually involved in food anymore, which is a big change from a few decades ago. How do we make that connection, and why does it matter?
Well, it really is a social challenge, right? So not all that long ago, in my grandparents' generation, nearly a quarter of America farmed. Now think about that. Not all that long ago. A quarter of America farmed. Now we're down to 1.4% and even less. And what's happening is great news. Folks want to know where their food comes from. As we've seen this urbanization happen, we've had less people connected to the farm, and folks need to know where their food comes from. They really want to. And we have to figure out how to answer those questions in a way that's authentic. Not superficial, but authentic. And right now, let's be honest, there's a superficial discussion going on around food.
What do you mean?
Well, often it's big or small. Big is bad, small is terrific. Or food produced with no technology versus food produced with a lot of technology. And one is good and one is kind of scary. And the reality is we need all of that. We need large farms to produce lots of safe, abundant food at cost that are affordable, because we forget about affordability as a rich country, and we can't impose our rich country view on poor countries. And we need small farms to keep rural communities vibrant, to be great incubators of these new ideas that will ultimately be adopted by the bigger players. So we need it all.
Let me ask you this. We're my Middlebury friends, okay? I went to college in Middlebury. I had a bunch of friends who were dairy farmers. And where is Jerry? Jerry's here. We were talking last night about how difficult it is for Jerry to get help on the farm to work the farm. So many of my friends who were in dairy are out of it now, and we're talking about, you know, people who seem to be leaving this. I mean, if we're down to 1.4%, A, is this trend continuing? And B, how do we get people to get back into growing the food we all want to eat?
Well, you know, first consolidation in agriculture has been going on since the beginning of time. And we actually have
some of it is just...
It's just the nature of progress, if you will. Having said that, I think we need to have an authentic discussion around the role of small farmers at this point in our evolution, because we really do need both. My previous comment wasn't just a placeholder. We need large farms. We really do, to produce high quality, abundant food at low cost using proven technologies. We need small farms. Why? To be the incubators of that next great idea. You know, large farmers weren't hatched. Large farmers all started as small farmers. And they got bigger because either they were good at it or they had a succession plan where their family came back to the farm and were interested in it. So we need both to proceed forward in an orderly way.
Last one, and then we're going to sit down and we're going to have the panel join us and we're going to engage you guys in the food conversation. A lot of the students, Chris, who put up stories at Planet Forward were stories about food deserts and urban gardens to teach kids how to grow food. It's not like they're going to produce enough food to feed the city, but it's about this sort of almost food literacy. I ask you that question again, why that matters, right? I mean, if you can go to the Whole Foods or to Trader Joe's and get fresh food, does it really matter that you know how to grow a tomato?
I think it's essential. First of all, the food that's produced is important. That food feeds people, and that is not inconsequential. And how much is grown, not for me to decide. Might be a little, might be a lot. But I think one of the biggest benefits, if not the biggest benefit, is it gets the 98% involved in what it takes to grow food. I mean, let's be honest. Food is a biologic process. It's subject to the vagaries of weather. Pests come. What happens when there's a drought? All of those dynamics are what farmers in rural America have to contend with. And I think as people start to see that in rooftop gardens or a variety of urban settings, they realize there's a lot that goes into producing food, and there's a lot of terrific hard work. So I think there's two benefits. One, the food in and of itself is of value, and I don't want to diminish that at all. But secondly, the experience of it's hard to grow a crop, and things happen along the way.
When I had my house out in Virginia before I moved into the city, I had apple trees and pear trees and peach trees and cherry trees.
And I bet things happened.
Well, I was going to do the organic thing and not spray anything, so I never got any peaches as a result, because they'd pop out and they'd bud, and I'd get these little peaches, and then they'd turn brown and they'd get all fungy, whatever, and they'd drop. But I didn't spray anything, so I never got any peaches. Not a good story if you want to run a business. All right, let's sit down and pull the panel out. Thank you, Chris. I think are you here with me?
I'll go wherever you need me.
All right. All right, let's call out, this is a great group. Che Axum, he's director for the Center for Urban Agriculture and Gardening Education here at the University of the District of Columbia. Che Axum. Hello, Che. How are you? Enock Chikava. Enock has come in from Seattle to join us. He is a senior program officer with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Mark Edge. Mark is Director of Water Efficient Maize for Africa with Monsanto. And finally, we've got Tara Mittelberg. Tara is a Northwestern student and a Global Food Challenge winner, and we'll tell you what the Global Food Challenge is and was in just a minute. Hello, Tara. All right, so I want to quickly come down the line here and ask each one of you what urban agriculture means to you. Che?
Well, thank you for having me. And,
Thank you for coming.
Well, one of the things I am the director for the Center of Urban Agriculture and Gardening Education at the District of Columbia's land-grant university, UDC. And because it is a urban land grant, we have to answer these questions. But, if we're going to have more people on this planet very, very soon, and a lot of those people living in urban areas, we're going to have a combination of food grown in rural areas, peri-urban, and also urban areas. And we're going to have to do that. And more so, too, just the educational component of it. I think you talked a little bit earlier about is it important for folks to know how to grow a tomato? A long time ago, a lot of people were smokers, and at some point that really changed, and people knew that it was probably maybe not a good thing to smoke. So there was a whole educational thing behind that. We're going to have that with young folks to get them to understand the food systems and the importance of food systems.
How many of you have grown a tomato?
Yeah.
Okay. How many have grown corn? How many have grown artichokes? Oh, come on. Really? All right. Che, you've got farming in your family, right?
I do. My family came from Alabama in 1918 to Washington, D.C. area. But they did some farming. Washington, D.C. had farms at one time. But I think it kind of skipped a generation and hit me because my dad was a engineer and a doo-wop singer. So I'm not good at either of those things. So.
I was going to invite you to try.
No, so farming, it came back a generation and hit me. So yeah, that's how I got bitten.
You're working on science right now because you're a scientist as well. You were at USDA before that. And Che participated in one of our Planet Forward salons where we were talking about urban agriculture. And what I thought was most interesting about your presentation, I thought everything was interesting about your presentation, but what I found especially interesting was the work you've done looking at how climate change is affecting the nutritional value of the food we consume and how that's driving actually some of your research.
Right, yeah, and a lot of folks aren't really looking at that climate change as a factor which is decreasing some of the nutrients, or possibly might decrease some nutrients in the food. And in some ways it increasing some, like it's increasing sometimes the vitamin C of strawberries, but as far as other crops, they're looking at some other crops, perhaps that the nutritional level of these crops are going down because of the high temperatures. So we're looking at different varieties of vegetable crops which can be grown in the cities and which have some of these like tomatoes, which have heat set genes in it, which can do the work they need to do at very high temperatures and things like that. So it's very critical that we do that kind of research. And that's what USDA wants to fund this thing, and other folks want to fund it. We have to have quantifiable, qualified research in urban agriculture so we can then go say, well, we need more money for research. Other than that, it's going to be a challenge.
Enock, let me come over to you and engage Mark in this conversation too. This is a partnership, and part of the purpose of this panel is to talk about some of the partnerships that are out there, because partnerships matter. So you're with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and you've worked on this WEMA project, right? Which is?
That is the water-efficient maize for Africa.
Water-efficient maize for Africa. Why? Because Africa, sub-Saharan Africa in particular, has a serious water problem that in many places is getting worse. Tell us a little bit about what this program is and what the innovations are that have been baked into it to improve maize production.
So this is a very smart partnership between technology developers like Monsanto, really the cutting edge of developing new traits. And we have to be working with the African governments. There are 5 countries or 5 governments that we work with. We are also working with other public research organizations like the CIMMYT, as well as the National Agricultural Research Institutes. And basically, drought is one of the main constraints, impeding productivity in Africa. So for smallholder farmers to have an incentive to invest in productivity enhancing technologies like seeds and fertilizers, they have to be sure that when they buy those, then they can get a much better yield. So to have that incentive, we need to tackle one of the main constraints, which is the soil water. So in this partnership, where Monsanto has donated one of its novel traits, which I'm sure Mark will talk about.
So Mark, explain that. And you know, gorilla in the room always when you say Monsanto is also GMO. So you can tell us whether this is a GMO or not and how this works.
Well, first of all, the WEMA project involves both conventional breeding and biotechnology. So we don't look at it as biotechnology as a silver bullet with a simple solution for everything. We really focus on systems-based solutions. But there is technology that has been developed by Monsanto, and we started working on this probably in the late 1990s of looking at what are the biggest issues facing agriculture, and drought has always been one of those. So how could biotechnology come in and try to help address that? So they actually did discovery in the early 2000s, took that gene forward, brought it into the corn, tested it in the United States. I actually was the commercial launch lead for a drought trait in the United States. It was launched here in 2013. But before we even had launched it in the United States and tried to turn it into making sure that it was a commercial product, we had committed to the WEMA project to make it available for the research in WEMA and started testing it in Africa in 2008. So we've been working on this partnership since 2008. I think sometimes folks don't quite realize how much technology, how much time, how much testing goes into having to develop these technologies to make them work for the farmers in their local conditions. What we developed in the United States, the varieties won't work in Africa. We have to use different varieties. It has to be white maize. It has to be maize that the farmers want to use. But we have had good success of launching that trait in the United States. It's showing value to farmers here. And so we're in the final stages of testing it in Africa and hope to be able to introduce it here in the next year or two.
Enock, back to you for a moment, because when we think of Africa and when we put this conversation in the context of the growth of urban areas, Africa faces several challenges. One is drought and water constraints. The other is the migration of men and the disappearance of men in many places to the city, or in some cases, sadly, to conflict or to HIV/AIDS. I was talking with somebody recently who had been to a village in Africa, and they were shocked by what they saw because they met with the farmers and they were all women. They were all women.
Yep.
How does this project and how is your work addressing the urbanization and this incredibly dramatic demographic shift in the parts of Africa that need to grow the food for the cities of Africa?
Brilliant. So I would say in several ways. So firstly, just to give you a little bit of numbers here, population growth in Africa is at 3%.
3%.
Urbanization is at 4%.
At?
4% per annum. And also Africa is producing 17 million new job seekers per year. And find that every graduate would then go to the city hoping for some new job in technology or any other profession. But the sad reality is that when they get into the cities are not growing as fast in terms of industrialization. So they get into the cities, there are no jobs. So we are now looking at how can we slow down urbanization in a smart way by making sure that agriculture can absorb the youth and also have a meaningful economic activity right in the rural areas. And we are anticipating that in the next maybe 20 to 30 years, we should be able to create new urban centers within the rural areas. But that is only possible when agriculture becomes profitable.
You gotta make money.
At smallholder farmer level. And that means a 2 hectare can be converted into a viable economic unit. That only happens when productivity goes up. And in productivity, I mean they need to be using technologies like improved seeds, like fertilizer, like crop advisory services for them to double the yield or even triple the
So
yield.
these are the innovations you need. You need to double yield. You need to increase the profitability so that people will stay on the market.
Yeah.
Terry, you're a student from?
Northwestern University.
And you visited Africa last year?
Yeah, with the Land O'Lakes Global Food Challenge, part of this was visiting Land O'Lakes International Development Projects. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from this is just how community level the solutions were. You know, we say we went to Africa, but we went to Malawi and Zambia. We went to different countries there. And each country and each community had different solutions that were better for that community. And Enock mentioned making communities profitable. In one community, that meant a village savings and loan project where they had a box and everyone would put money in the box, and then once everybody was together, they were allowed to open the box and take out loans, and that was very empowering to be able to have capital, to be able to invest in future agricultural development.
And they were doing that for agricultural
Yes.
investment?
Yeah.
And who was managing that? Was that the
It was a group of women.
group of women?
Yeah.
Same.
yeah.
Did you notice the gender issue that I was just mentioning?
And so there was 4 or 5 women who were mostly in charge of it, and each of them had a key. And so all of them had to be present in order to open the box, and that added more transparency. Yeah, and so it was a very interesting thing. And then we went to Zambia as well, and there was a completely different solution there. It made sense. They had some goats, and so they trained one woman on how to vaccinate the goats and take care of the goats. And so in that situation, that was a better solution. And so it's very community-based, and it's hard to just say, yes, we should do this, and that'll work for everywhere.
Why are you doing, we've talked about sort of food and agricultural literacy, and I should mention that GW is also one of the schools been fortunate enough to be part of the Global Food Challenge. So perhaps you could talk about this a little bit and why, and then I know you want to jump in. So.
Well, Frank, it goes back to the 98%, 2%. We see that we need to enrich this discussion around food in a lot of different ways. And what better way than to get folks who didn't grow up on a farm, who are curious about agriculture, getting involved in it to learn firsthand. So we did start the Land O'Lakes Global Food Scholars Program with that in mind, and it has been a success beyond our wildest dreams. It has attracted folks who look at agriculture as a global growth, high-tech business that has a pretty noble purpose. Not the way perhaps most folks have thought about agriculture in the United States as something that happens out in rural America. This is central to our future. And I'm amazed at the creative solutions we're hearing and the terrific observations we're getting from our scholars. But it was all about getting the 2% more involved.
Jay, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm very interested, what you're talking about, the maize and things like that, because how many here are familiar with a growing technique called grow biointensive or biointensive farming? Okay, yeah. There's a gentleman, good friend of mine in Willits, California. His name is John Jevons. He's been doing this for some 40 years, increasing yields through certain agricultural methods, carbon farming and growing, basically trying to see how much full diet crop you can grow in a specific area. But I think what you talked about earlier, like the maize things you talked about, and even though he doesn't use like the traditional fertilizers, but he is able to grow a lot more food in very small spaces doing different techniques like double digging the soil down to a depth of 24 inches and growing specific crops for composting and things like that. So I think maybe a combination of these things could be used to really, increase these food production methods and, for small landholders.
I want to throw a question out, sort of a jump ball question to you guys, and I'd be interested in anybody chiming in if you've got thoughts on this or you have experience, and that is urban agriculture as an actual activity, okay? Vertical farming, rooftop farming, backyard farming. I mentioned that one of our award winners last year did a story on a woman who's actually started a pretty successful consulting business helping city slickers figure out how to grow tomatoes. So is this something that, pardon the pun, can take root here, or is this an amusement?
Well, no, it already has. I think it's here to stay. It's here to stay because I think there's a quiet food revolution going on as far as producers and people being very interested in growing food. And my only thing is, I've always tried in many ways that when I grow food is to grow foods, especially in urban areas with using as less fossil fuels as you can. But vertical farming and things like that. If solar can be used for, the lighting and some other things like that, I'm all for it. But whatever we do to grow and get more definitely younger folks interested in understanding the food system, you know, how sustainable food systems work. I mean,
Enock, is this happening in Africa too, in urban areas, or not so much?
Yes, so I would say it's happening from two fronts. Firstly, about 10 to 30% of the total land holding today in Africa is actually in the hands of urban dwellers.
In urban dwellers' hands? In an urban area?
No, it is just on the fringes of the urban
fringes.
centers. Why? Because we've got civil servants, other professionals. They're also beginning to realize that agriculture can make a huge contribution, not only as a hobby, but also as an actual economic activity. So I would say that's one trend which is ongoing right now. And then the second is around the nutrition.
Nutrition.
And then you realize that if you go across Africa and you look at the protein, the amount of protein which people eat, you realize that most of that should be in chickens or pigs. If you just take the per capita consumption of poultry, for example, or chicken, in Nigeria, a population of 170 million people, the per capita consumption is about 2 kg per person per year.
Per year?
That's like you go to McDonald's once, and then someone eats that for the whole year. So the question is, if Nigeria is going to move from 2 kg per person per year to about 10 kg per person per year, just to give you some perspective, South Africa, which is the biggest consumer of chicken in Africa, is about 48 kg per person per year. The US is about 52 kg. Brazil is about 58. Nigeria is at 2%.
2.
So just taking from 2% to 10%, you need a lot of feed. And for your chicken feed or your pig feed, you need 60% corn. And you need 35% from your soybean, which is your protein. So it means we have to produce more corn. And how do you produce more corn? You need to talk about productivity. We need to produce more soybean, and already there's a relationship between corn and soybean.
Is that happening in these near urban areas?
So it is beginning to happen right now. So we have several projects in Nigeria, in Tanzania, in Ethiopia, and several places. Why? Because we need to feed the urban population. Today, just to finish that point, the chicken in those urban centers cost $8 per kilo. So only a few people can afford it. But the more chicken you produce, you can now reduce the cost of chicken, and then it becomes more available to urban dwellers, especially the poor.
You know, Frank, there's another thing. Not only can it occur, it must occur, because particularly in wealthy countries, developed Europe and the United States, we have to be awfully careful that we don't view food and food production systems through the eyes of a rich country. We have lots of choices around food, how it's produced, how it's segmented, what it means to us as individuals to consume different kinds of food. But I think as people get more involved in growing food, they realize how difficult it is. I don't want to be redundant what I said earlier, but you know, this is a biologic process subject to weather, subject to disease. You joked about the fact that you had pears and apples.
Right.
Think about this. The least sustainable crop that you grow is one that you've lost to disease.
Right.
All that input, all that land, all that water, all that seed goes to waste. So when do you use crop protection products in a sustainable way? Boy, that's a learning that I think could occur in urban settings that would be enlightening to allow farmers who are out in rural America or in other parts of the world permission to do what they need to do.
So Frank, you asked at the beginning about what do we think about urban agriculture, and I think what struck me on that is make a distinction between commodity production of agriculture and sort of differentiated products that we tend to eat on our dinner plate on a daily basis. The more differentiated and the more specific things can be done better in the closer to urban areas. There's a lot of efficiency to be gained. There's a lot of logic in all of that. But when we talk about the need for the protein and the animal livestock, the farming that I came from in north central Iowa, my family farm doesn't have the option to do the sort of diversity that you have in an urban farming setting. So that sort of distinction needs to be understood about agriculture and not put one against the other, but recognize they need to work together. Now, in Africa, I don't see it necessarily falling along exactly the same lines as what we have in sort of Europe or America.
Right.
And that's because there's a lot of infrastructure challenges that they don't have. So the urban agriculture there, they want chickens and eggs. They need more protein. And despite whether, people think people should be vegetarian or not, the first thing that happens, even if these vegetarian societies, if they get more income, they want more meat. And so that's just going to happen whether we philosophically agree with eating more meat or not. And so this urban agriculture in developing countries is going to be feeding a diverse thing of not necessarily a diverse diet for humans, but for this protein that is needed. And so I think it's a unique view on how it can be different in developing countries like Africa.
Tara, as an American going to Africa and as a student studying this and somebody with millennial tastes, presumably, what have you discovered or seen or learned that you think is sort of the coolest innovation in food growing, or that you'd like to get your hands into some more in your travels, either in the U.S. or abroad? Because there's so much stuff that's happening. Mm-hmm. People don't realize. We talked about autonomous cars earlier, driverless cars. We've got autonomous vehicles. They're involved in precision agriculture. They're out doing these perfect. Do you have one of those, Jerry? Do you sit there doing the crossword puzzle while your tractor drives itself?
I would prefer to think that I'm doing something more constructive than but yes, we do have, GPS technology.
So and it drives itself, right?
That's correct.
Okay, did you know that? I think that's the coolest thing. I want to drive one of those things. But anyway, what have you bumped into?
So last quarter, I did a research project about insects as food and how supposedly this is going to be one of the next big things. I think Kathleen Merrigan mentioned this as well.
Cricket flour.
Yes, cricket flour. I actually made cookies out of cricket flour. They were okay.
Did you advertise them as cricket cookies?
Yes, and people actually tried them. Some of my friends
once,
tried them.
yeah.
Yes, but not anymore. But no, but so I was interviewing somebody.
Did you have chocolate chirps in them?
Oh.
Sorry. Keep going.
There's this company called Aspire, and they're based out of Austin, Texas, but they also have facilities in Ghana as well. And there's this insect, and it's a palm weevil, and the larvae of it is this huge, meaty white maggot, basically.
Oh, that sounds really appetizing.
but it's part of the diet. And in the past, they would go out and they live in palm trees, and they would go out and collect it from the palm tree and just eat it. And this NGO has found a way to consolidate this production, and now they take the palm trees that were once on palm oil plantations, and normally these palm trees would just be burned, and so all that carbon would be released into the atmosphere, and now this carbon is being converted by the palm weevil into an edible form. And this is a totally creative solution that nobody would have thought of off the top of their head, and it's these innovations like this that I think are going to be really important.
How are your cookies?
Okay.
It's interesting. We talked about Africa and protein. At the farm in Beltsville, we have a 143-acre farm. We don't farm all 143 acres, but we do kind of do agricultural methodologies and technology. Then we shrink them back down and take them to the city. So we have this concept called urban food hub. So in the city, hopefully in all the wards of the city, we will either have either aquaponics, hydroponic systems, in-ground soil growing systems. But I can see where this, definitely the aquaponic systems, because we've signed a memorandum of agreement or understanding with Malawi, and I think we're going to do one with Ghana soon. So they're coming to see these systems where we have one system where we basically have 2 500-gallon fish tanks for tilapia in a shipping container. So your protein can be there. And so that's one thing too. But you also talk about the women and the men being absent. As kind of relates to what I'm seeing in urban areas where the men are there, especially men coming back from prison, looking for jobs. So we're trying to create different kind of situations.
You're working with some of them.
Yeah, different kind of situations to embrace them so they can, find things they can do which are profitable. And so it's a unique challenge for urban areas, you know.
So we have had quite a range of ideas, innovations, experience. Let's open up to some questions now and have you put a question to the group. And let's start with Gabe from UN Food and Agriculture Organization. I can think of no one better to start with, Gabe, but no one's going to want to follow you because it's...
No pressure at all. My name is Gabriel Lies. I work for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN. Wonderful conversation so far. 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted or lost. We don't need to produce more. We need to use better what we have. Could you comment about that and what is being done and what are the solutions maybe from a student perspective of what we can do to conserve better what we have than trying to grow more? Thank you.
Food waste.
Go ahead, Enock.
Okay, so we have a program where we have with WFP, the World Food Program, so which they call the Zero Hunger campaign. So before you want to increase your yield by another 30%, there's already 30% being lost today. So again, I don't think it is an either or. We need both. So whilst we are raising the productivity through newer technologies, we are also at the same time looking at how can we reduce the post-harvest losses. And there are several technologies. We've got the pigs, hermetic bags. So we are working with various companies to make sure that at community level, as the farmers produce, they're already thinking about, do I have the right infrastructure in order to reduce, the post-harvest losses?
It's similar to some other conversations we had. No one size is going to fit all, right? So you do need to think about productivity per and output and growth. Large farms, more technology. Small farms, more creativity. Urban food systems. Similar on food waste. In Africa, it's post-harvest loss. And what does that mean? It means some storage systems. It means better matching market to production, demand with supply, so that we're creating markets that not just don't waste the food, but create economic vitality up and down the food supply chain. In the U.S., it's as simple as something like portion size, which is a large contributor to food waste in the U.S. So no one size fits all, and I think you're absolutely right to tackle this feeding the 9 billion. We're going to need a little bit of everything.
I just want to, Jay, I'll let you do this, but
Okay.
the portion size thing is
Yeah.
There is a restaurant I go to, not at all. I went once. I won't name it. The portion sizes were so huge, it was obscene. It was, I don't know whether they think that makes it a better, that people like that because it's so, but you see massive amounts being thrown out. And it's clearly a marketing thing, right? They charge more or whatever, but we got to do something about this.
Yeah, and interesting enough, I've heard quite a few times in the past couple of months that 60% or more, 75% or more, that food that goes into the DC public food system for schools is thrown away. And the number one reason most kids are saying they're throwing the food away because it doesn't taste good. Many times growers, I always have tried to grow for flavor and do things in production which could produce food with flavor. But if I can get it to flavor to come out the ground and I got it, but then the people who process it, who cook it, who peel it or whatever, keeping that flavor in it so food tastes good for young folks and they won't throw it away. And I bet you that just happens all over the country.
Oh, but don't we all remember like the what were the wax beans that you got when you were in school and somebody just boiled the heck out of them and they tasted like paper clips?
Well, yeah, and that's I would love to see just
I
some
eat paper
numbers
clips a lot, so I know.
on the food laws from schools. I would love to see the numbers.
Yeah, Terry, you want to
globally or locally?
Addressing the school issue, my university has an organization called Campus Kitchens, and I know other universities have chapters as well. And we recover food from the dining halls and consolidate it and donate it to the YWCA in our school. We donate it to low-income people, and that reduces food waste and addresses community hunger. But I think on a larger scale, we obviously can't reduce food waste just by these very small programs alone. There also needs to be structural change and incentivizing companies to reduce their waste. And maybe if there's a canning plant and a shipment goes wrong, creating subsidies so it's just as profitable for them to donate that to a shelter instead of just throwing it all away. I think there are a lot of different things that need to come together.
There's one more aspect I'd like to add to that is that when we talk about food loss, there's an issue that there's an assumption, I think, in the Western world that we're throwing away food that is safe and good. In Africa and many developing countries, there's issues about the quality of the food actually that's harvested and the quality of actually what's coming in. In maize, there's a particular issue of aflatoxins or mycotoxins in the grain, which causes cancer. Diseases, poor productivity actually creates grain that is actually very unsafe to eat. It should be thrown away and it might not be. So this food loss issue is very complicated. Technology does help actually reduce the amount of aflatoxins in grain. So I think we need to look at it in a multifaceted way. It's certainly an issue out there, but we can't come up with a one-size-fits-all solution.
I want to do one quick round because we're almost out of time here and ask you to all think ahead 5-10 years. Think about the innovations you know, the innovations that are in the pipeline, the innovations that you would imagine if you could. If we're going to feed this planet, if we're going to feed these gigantic cities, some of these mega cities of 20, 25, 30 million people, some of the megalopolises that are being created in China and elsewhere that are 100 million people, we have to grow good food, we have to transport it well, it needs to be healthy, it needs to be affordable, all that. So think out, all right? I'm now granting you each a magic wand. All right, you all have crystal balls, and you can make it happen. All right, so I'm going to save you to the end because you're going to be the best. So, Mark, go ahead. What would you see?
Yeah, I get to go first. So I actually do think that the technologies that we need are already there. We need more creative of bringing them together and work in partnerships and collaborations to figure out what's local
So
solutions.
what's an innovative partnership?
So an innovative partnership is one that brings together a food company with an input company with the producer and creates a value chain along the way that says this is going to be for the benefit of the overall community here, and keep focus in the local community to help reduce the drive towards everybody being urbanized and going into certain areas. I think that there's just I don't know that we need revolution. I think we need evolution in a very fast way, which is a revolution to just evolve that quickly.
Enock, what's your innovation?
For me, I think it boils down to leadership.
We need innovative leadership?
We need good leaders in Africa, because I think a lot of the hunger and problems are boiled down to the leadership. You need leaders who are visionary, you need leaders who actually prioritize agriculture and fund it, and not just to depend on donors. I think governments should be focusing at agriculture as an investment, not as a social enterprise.
So does the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation say, hey guys, this is not an open-ended pipeline here. Yep. You have 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and then you better make this work on your own?
So that's exactly the discussion we're having right now, is to discuss with the government, what is your plan? What is your 2020 vision? What is your 2030 vision? How can you start to work today and make sure that after 10 years, you are self-sustaining and you build a strong agricultural system that is sustainable?
Jay?
Well, for me, I definitely, at the research level at the university is, really getting younger folks to understand the food systems, sustainable food systems. And also in urban areas at community gardens and things like that, just getting folks to be better growers and being able to at some time quantify, yields and also carbon amount captured by a certain type of carbon farming and things like that, because we really could use more research dollars from the USDA as far as, urban agriculture is concerned. And the only way you're going to get those dollars is to have something that is quantifiable and qualifiable.
What's your blue sky?
My wish would be that the small farmers in the developed world, the U.S. and Western Europe, are the most technologically aggressive, the most creative at bringing new technologies to bear around boutique crops that are potentially then adopted by larger farmers. Right now we have the opposite going on. Larger farmers tend to be the most technology driven, and smaller farmers tend not to be. There's exceptions to that. I think we've got it wrong. I think we've got to flip that, and we have to have the small farmers be the incubators of the next great technology, the next great ideas that get adopted.
And are you into urban ag too? Are you growing stuff in
Absolutely. I think those are places where this notion of small points of incubation are very leverageable. But we don't have it right now.
Nobody's mentioned the green roof. We're not going to grow our way to happiness with green roofs?
Well, we have a green roof at the university. We have a 20,000 square foot food producing green roof on campus. So we've grown thousands and thousands of pounds of food last year, which we donated to folks like Bread for the City, so others might eat, and some of it went to DC Central Kitchen, and also some of the food from our green roof went to our first time ever CSA on campus. So it was very productive. And,
Here I said I was going to hold you for the
Turned out well.
end because you are the innovation, I think, right? So you're about to launch your career. You got all this time to do. What are you thinking about doing?
You know, we've thrown around this number 2050 a lot, and how at that time we're going to have 9.6 billion people to feed. We're going to be feeling the effects of climate change. More people are going to be demanding meat and fuel. And this 2050 kind of seems this abstract number, but I'm going to turn 55 in 2050, and that's going to be our generation's time.
Still young.
Yeah, but exactly. We're still young. We're going to be
55 is the new 25.
Exactly. No. We're going to be in the peaks of our careers as policymakers and as business people and leading NGOs. And I think we all need to understand the conversation. And to understand conversations about food, we need to understand where it comes from. So I would challenge everyone to visit a farm. That's going to be my big contribution, is everyone should visit a farm and see truly how it works on the ground, because it's a lot different than what we talk about often here in the cities.
What are you thinking for a career? Do you know
That's
yet?
the big question. Maybe research, we'll see.
Okay, all right. All right, I think we need to thank this amazing panel and this really interesting conversation. Here's the challenge. I mean, the challenge is to make sure that we grow the food that we want to grow. Everybody in this room is now a foodie. Everybody in this room is a foodie, okay? You've got an opinion. We want to eat healthy. We want to live to 105. All these great things. We want to be able to afford it. But we also need to be mindful of people who don't have access to food, people who live in food deserts, people who are in the developing world who face odds and obstacles that you need to go see to appreciate, because there's no amount of talking about it that will let you appreciate what someone's up against when that is the world they're in. So that means that there's a lot of opportunity for innovation. There's a lot of opportunity for this evolution and revolution and all these other things that are going on. So thanks to you all very much. Please join me in thanking the panel.
Thanks,
Chris.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Jay. Thanks. Enock. It's great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Tara. And go Northwestern. Okay, so how many, by the way, how many people here are interested in food? All right? A lot. All right, so please find these folks when we break this afternoon. If you're interested, Sophie Esser-Calvi from Middlebury College has a thing called FoodWorks, which is a really cool program they do. If you're interested in that, talk to Sophie. And I think you'll see that there's a lot of stuff going on here and a lot of things that you can be a part of.